Hello, guys, and welcome to episode 68 of the Beat Your Backlog podcast, a podcast discussing the things gamers like to put off, get to another day, and oh yes, will definitely beat later, their backlog. I'm your host, Adam, and today we are having a kickabout on the streets of the Ecuadorian capital of Quito in Julian Cordero and Sebastian Valbuena's footballing indie gem Despelote. And if you don't know what despelote means, apparently, according to Google, despelote means chaos or a hot mess in English. And the game was actually released quite recently. I'm recording now in June, but it was released back on the 1st of May on Steam, and it's currently only on Steam. And it's currently sitting at a very positive review score on Steam with 223 reviews. I'm actually quite surprised at how low that review count is. I thought it would be way more because there was quite a lot of buzz around this game when it released. And one of the reasons there was so much buzz around the game is because of its Metacritic score, because it is currently sitting at a massive 89% or 89 out of 100 for its critic review score. So obviously critics love this game and scored it very highly. And talking about love, I really love football and have always wondered why video games haven't really explored the culture of football more deeply. For the last 20 years or so, maybe even going on to 30 years, FIFA or EA Sports FC as it's known now has really dominated like the virtual footballing space. There were a few other games back in the day. You had Pro Evolution Soccer's and Mario Strikers, but FIFA has always been the one that has dominated this kind of simulation style gameplay, and it's sort of murkied the waters a little bit for me with footballing games because of course FIFA and now EA Sports FC is synonymous with microtransactions, and it's just not a game that I enjoy playing really anymore. Like I used to be, I think my first one was 98. So I played it for years and years, and I think the last one I really played extensively was 2017, and then I just kind of got out of it because I always enjoyed playing the manager mode, but obviously EA pushed all of its kind of resources into the online stuff, which I wasn't really interested in. So yeah, for years and years I've been kind of wanting something to fill that FIFA gap, but not necessarily a simulation type game, but just a game about football that is different and interesting. And so I've been really waiting a long time for a game that isn't FIFA, something that's different and not based really around winning the Champions League or Premier League, but instead one that looks at football from a different angle. So when I heard about a small football game called Despelote that made waves during a recent Steam Neckfest, I think it was back in January now, so it's not that recent, I really couldn't wait to try it, especially since I had recently got my hands on a new Steam Deck. So what is Despelote? Is it an alternative to FIFA that I've been dreaming of? And is it worth your time? Let's find out in this week's episode of the Beat Your Backlog podcast. But before we get into the episode, I would like to remind you that you can support the podcast on Patreon. If you do, you will gain access to all of my content 24 hours early, and you will unlock the Beat Your Backlog bonus vault, which is starting to be filled up with exclusive podcast episodes only for Patreon supporters. This month's episode will be my early thoughts on the Switch 2. So if you're interested in hearing that, make sure you go and support on Patreon. If you're interested, you can go to patreon.com/beatyourbacklog, or you can click on the link in the description down in the episode below, or the link in the description below, I should say. And as always, thank you to all of my Patreon supporters, whether you are paid or you are free. Doing either really helps. So please head over to Patreon to show your support. So let's get into the story of Despelote. And Despelote is described as a slice of life game. And it's a very interesting setting because it's set in the summer of 2001 in the Ecuadorian capital of Quito, which interestingly, maybe not interestingly actually, but kind of embarrassingly, I didn't know that was the capital of Ecuador. I'd never heard of Quito before. That summer of 2001 is a landmark in Ecuadorian history because it is the first year that the national football team qualified for the FIFA World Cup. So this is the FIFA World Cup in Japan and South Korea in 2002. And in the game, you play as an 8-year-old football lover living his life kind of through or during this historic moment. And it's a very intriguing setting with the historic events unfolding around this character called Julian, who is the protagonist. And you sort of see this town start to buzz around the idea that the Ecuador might qualify for the first time as they go through their qualifying stage. So the games that they have to play to qualify for the World Cup against Peru, Argentina, Colombia, Bolivia, and Uruguay. And this is all happening basically as you play as Julian, just living his everyday life. I really enjoyed a lot of chapters, or a chapter I should say, in the game where a relative of Julian is getting married during a match, so whilst the match is happening, and as you're driving to the wedding, Julian is hearing his parents discuss whether or not the game will be shown at the wedding, and whether or not like they should show it, because if they don't show it, no one will turn up to the wedding, which I think is very, very funny, because yeah, as I will get onto a little bit more in the episode, I have lots of memories of that. I've been like, oh no, there's a big game on, a big football game on where England are playing, and you're like, oh, I hope they're gonna have it to be able to show it somewhere, because growing up also in the 2000s, this was before smartphones were a thing, so you were like, oh, I hope there's a screen somewhere that we can watch the game whilst this other kind of like wedding or birthday party or whatever is happening. So I thought that was quite funny. And another memorable moment I really liked in the game is Julian playing hide and seek in the park with his sister, whilst you were kind of secondhand hearing what is happening in one of the games as it blares out from a TV in a nearby shop, and you can just hear the commentating happening, and it's all in Spanish, but the rhythm of the commentator, as obviously he starts speaking more quickly and loudly as a goal chance appears. So that's also kind of like a very cool touch of, again, I remember growing up and playing outside, but also kind of trying to pay attention of what is happening, because of whilst it's on the radio, or playing outside my mum's house and her having the door open with the TV on, so you could kind of just sneak a peek through the TV to see what's happening whilst you were playing outside. And it really, really is like a slice of life game with the characters and the events really grounded in realism. There's nothing fantastical about this game. It's not like you are going into Julian's dreams and him like imagining Ecuador as this winning the cup, winning the championship, and through his imaginings that actually happens. No, it's all based in realism. You are simply just living Julian's life as the footballing events and the historic cultural events happen around him, which I think is very relatable, because as an Englishman, I've also lived through a few historic footballing moments myself. Not necessarily good moments for England as a team. We've lost 2 finals recently, but I can kind of relate to that. And what was interesting is it made me think about, again, my own footballing experiences, because I was around Julian's age during the 1998 football World Cup in France. And much like Julian, I was aware of the tournament and wanted England to win, but I didn't fully understand how the events of a footballing tournament can stir such national pride or heartbreak. And I remember where I was. I was on holiday in Mallorca, so like the Spanish island, if you don't know where Mallorca is. And I remember every night an England game was on, we would go to an Irish pub in a very British way. You go to a Spanish island for a holiday, but you end up always going to an Irish bar because they serve British or Irish drinks and food, which is obviously very similar. And I remember going there every time a game was on and watching the game. And I can remember specifically the Argentina game, which was England's round of 16 match against Argentina. I remember the Michael Owen wonder goal where he kind of just ran from more or less the halfway line, took on 2 or 3 defenders and then scored. And of course, I remember the controversial red card for David Beckham after kicking Diego Simone. And at the time, I've been about 7, I could grasp that Beckham sending off was bad, because it would inhibit our chances of winning the World Cup or winning the game. But I couldn't comprehend how that would turn him into a public enemy, number one, when he returned back to England later. I also remember that every time being in this pub after a game would finish, they would always show Titanic. So I must have seen Titanic about 7 times whilst on this holiday, because for whatever reason it would always be on after the football, which I thought was quite funny. Just a weird memory, a footballing memory. So the 98 World Cup will always be associated with Beckham being sent off, being in an Irish pub and watching Titanic after it, which is, funny. And I also thought back to the 2002 World Cup, which I said was in Japan and South Korea, because that is around when this game is based. And I remember I was in primary school, and they would let us go and watch the England games during school. So because of the time difference, it was usually like in the early morning or early afternoon the games would be on. So they would be like, all right, if you want to go and watch, you can leave your lessons and go and watch, which obviously I did. And I vividly recall the game England lost against Brazil, thanks to an iconic Ronaldinho free kick. And I remember back then I was convinced England were going to win. And there was this one guy in our school who I remember who was like the typical. He was very, very good at football, was very, very sporty, and he was there. He was the only one there in a Brazil shirt. and just thinking like, oh God, I hope we win so bad just so that this guy looks like an idiot. But no, of course Brazil won, and I mean, looking at the lineup now with Ronaldo, so R9, Ronaldinho, Rivaldo, and Roberto Carlos been just some of the players that were in that team. It's no wonder that they ended up going on to win the tournament. And because of all of these football memories, I really felt a connection to Julian's story. That said, I do think that Julian as a character was very passive in this story. So he mostly just goes around kicking a ball whilst the real sort of action happens around him. And he serves more of like a lens through which we as the player hear the townspeople's thoughts and emotions on Ecuador qualifying for the World Cup, but we don't actually get really any feeling of what Julian is thinking about it as the character. And this was made a little bit hard in the game because it was quite hard to follow what was actually going on with some of the other characters. So again, you're looking through Julian's eyes and watching a scene happen of people talking about the game. But because the game is fully voice acted in Spanish, which I actually really like because it adds more to the immersion, everything is then subtitled in English. However, how the subtitles works are they are sort of like speech bubbles appearing from different different characters, and I thought that the characters they're all obviously voice acted because I said that they were everything was done in Spanish. The characters, maybe the direction of how they were told to act is a little too casual. Like they were told like, okay, you need to sound natural, like just sound like you're having a conversation, but they went a little bit too far. So like a lot of conversations just really feel like they meander, where it just felt like an actor was in a booth just told like, oh, talk about talk about washing detergent, and they'd be like, okay, yeah, washing detergent, yeah, I really like washing detergent, it's good to wash your clothes. And then it just keeps going on kind of like that of like, it really felt like if two people were talking, it was just one person talking out loud and another person talking out loud, and they just happened to be talking about the same conversation. And because of that and the way that things worked, the subtitles were just always popping up. And I felt like sometimes there would be maybe 6 speech bubbles on the screen, and you're like, okay, I'm supposed to read all of them. But then they would, because they were speaking so quickly and because the conversations were moving on so quickly, you just couldn't really tell what was happening or what was going on. So I think like it would have been a little bit nicer if you were given a bit more time to read the subtitles, and also if the conversations wasn't so just kind of like just really like how I'm talking now. Like there would be pauses, there would be like, yeah, well, no, yeah, like as things are happening. Which made it really hard to follow as you were trying to read it in English. It might have been intentional. Now that I think about it, maybe I was thinking maybe it was done like this to reflect how a child sort of tunes out when adults are talking. So like, as adults kind of talk, they sort of, it turns into chatter. It kind of turns into like blah 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 blah. And all Julian is really thinking about is how much he wants to play football, so he's not really paying attention. But still, as a player, trying to become like immersed in the events of that summer and in the events of this game, I think the way that the narrative was told to you in this way was very hard to track and sort of made the game less interesting. It made me not really interested in what was happening or paying attention to what people were saying, unless it was very specifically about the events of football. So, yeah. In sort of general, like I said, I think Julian is too passive. I think he was more engaged in the story. Like it would have been nice to hear his excitement or feel his excitement about Ecuador qualifying for the World Cup. Instead, he's a silent protagonist who is sort of like just like a ghost who experiences events happening without really interacting with them. That said, though, I did enjoy hearing the adult Julian narrate his memories. So later on in the game, you actually hear the developer Julian, I keep switching between the two, sorry. But you hear him narrating what his memories are and also why he created Despelote, which I thought was fascinating. There's some really cool fourth wall breaking moments towards the end of the game that I don't want to spoil, but that was like my favourite part. And ironically, when it first happened, I was like, oh, this must be like a bug, like the game's just broken. But it turned out to be brilliant and deliberate, I should say, and absolutely brilliant. So you do get some kind of retrospective from Julian as an adult about what he remembers of these events. He actually said, I think he was actually younger than the Julian in the game when they happened, so his memory was a little bit foggier. But I did like that he at least gave his thoughts on what he kind of remembered, a bit like how I'm doing now in this podcast about what I remember from the '98 World Cup and the 2002 World Cup. So there was that, but I do feel like as the character in the game, I wish you got a bit more of like his personality and how, you know, how excited it made him feel, and because he loves football so much, whereas really he doesn't have any reaction to anything that happens in the game, really. And yeah, talking about the football, that was the thing that really drew me into despelote initially, was the first person football action teased in the trailer. And I really thought like the whole game mechanic was going to revolve around you know, kicking a ball. So maybe there would be some puzzles where you needed to hit certain targets with the ball, or I don't know, smash a window or something like that. Like things where I was like, okay, the whole game mechanic will be based around you playing football. Sadly, this wasn't really the case. The football mechanic really just feels tacked on, like kind of giving you something to do other than just walking around whilst you wander Quito, rather than it being like a core mechanic. The controls are very, very simple. You just move with the left stick, at least on the Steam Deck I'm talking about. You move with the left stick and you shoot with the right, and the longer that you pull back the right stick, so if you pull it down and then flick it forward, the more powerful your shot should be. But in practice, I thought the controls were really, really clunky. The ball, like the physics of the ball, means that it often veers off unexpectedly when you kick it. It's really hard to aim. There is an option to turn on a reticle for aiming, but that really didn't help me much at all. The power shots are really finicky, so you, like I said, you're supposed to like pull it back and then flick it forward to do a power shot. That often didn't happen. What usually would happen would be just me toe punting the ball forward a little bit, and instead of me kind of launching a screamer into the top bin like I was expecting to happen, and trying to turn with the ball is kind of like, it's like you're trying to turn like a Boeing 747 round. Like you can't just turn on the spot, you have to do a big circle and turn around. So in the section, the one or two sections where it does need you to aim and hit something, if you miss and you want to turn around and go again, it takes forever. And yeah, it doesn't exactly make me think of this is how an 8-year-old moves whilst playing football. And yeah, it's really like just not fleshed out well, or really thought about well. It just feels like this is a walking simulator game basically, where you just happen to have a football to kick as you walk. And yeah, there was one really frustrating section where you had to actually knock bottles off of a wall to annoy like an old man there, and this must have taken me maybe 50 attempts to do, because I mean the bottles aren't really that high, but I just couldn't get enough lift or precision on the ball to actually hit one of the bottles. And what I eventually did was I had to get like a massive run up, like basically the space that the game would give me, I ran up, and then I just had to time the flick perfectly to get enough power behind the ball to get it to go up and hit this bottle. Luckily, I managed to hit one and knock that off the wall, and again, luckily that was enough for me to move this story onwards, because I was like, oh, if I have to hit all three, I probably would have just stopped playing the game. It was that bad. So it was a shame that, yeah, the footballing, yeah, it was just there as like the game is about the football, about these footballing cultural events. So you are playing football, but yeah, I just think it was a shame that Julian as a character doesn't really come across as a football lover. He just seems to be, he has a football. Yeah, that's exactly it. Like there isn't really any footballing gameplay in it other than just, again, walking around with a football at your feet, unfortunately. So that gets us then onto the art, which I did actually really like about the game. So yeah, this was the second major draw of the game's art, was the game's art style, I should say. And I've never really seen anything like it. Like, it's really, really interesting. I really suggest you go to my written review and look at the screenshots, because the world appears to be kind of 3D mapped out from the real streets of Quito. So if you look at it, like it just looks like if you're on Google Maps basically, but it's been rendered in like a brown and yellow texture that really reminds me of like vintage TV static. So it's very fuzzy and yeah, like I said, like brownish yellow. But then in contrast to that, the characters are quite simple. They have like sketch-like illustrations, almost like doodles from the margin of like a kid's school notebook. So the contrast is great because you have this fuzzy brownness and this very plain white like brightness. which put on top of each other just makes it a really, really interesting game to look at. I should have prepared, for the people watching the video, I should have prepared a video showing you the gameplay. I forgot about that, sorry. But yeah, do go over to my Patreon review and look at the screenshots, or look up the game, you know, on YouTube, and you'll see how it looks, because yeah, it's a really beautiful contrast. Gives the game a very, very unique visual identity, and it's not something I've ever seen before. So I'm really happy that the game lived up to that sort of hype draw for me, where, you know, the footballing didn't. I also really like the sound design in the game too. The ambient sounds of people chatting, children playing, or music playing from radios in Quito make the city in the game feel alive. And it was also kind of fascinating to learn that the devs actually recorded the real sounds in Quito, even having to hire like a private security to protect their sound gear, because you know, they were scared they were going to get robbed. It was definitely worth it. It adds such a rich atmosphere to every street in the game, and because you're spending most of your time on the streets, you definitely needed that. So I think that was like a great achievement of the game too, that it really makes you feel like you are in a park, you are kicking a ball against a wall. Really, really good. So yeah, that kind of then brings me on to the conclusion of the game, because the game itself isn't that long. It's only about 2 hours long. So yeah, should you play Despelote? And Despelote currently sits at an 89 out of 100 on Metacritic for critic reviews, but only a 6 out of 10 for user reviews. And I think that says a lot. Critics love it for proving that games don't need to be set in New York, London, or Los Angeles, or revolve around world-ending stakes. Instead, it's about a developer reliving his childhood and reminiscing about Ecuador's historic World Cup qualification. However, as a game, Despelote feels bare bones. Julian doesn't drive the story, and there's not much story to begin with. You passively witness the matches, but get no insight from Julian himself. I did enjoy the developer narration, but I wish the player had a bit more of a role. In addition, the football mechanics don't feel great. They feel more like an afterthought. They're very unrefined and often frustrating, and they fit to the theme but don't contribute much to gameplay. Nevertheless, the art and sound are excellent, though the TV static aesthetic may not be for everyone. In my opinion, Despelote isn't a must-play. I played it because I love football and was intrigued by the high Metacritic score. I did enjoy my 2 hours with it, but I did expect more. So I would recommend either waiting for a sale or hoping that it lands on a service like Game Pass before diving in. So yeah, so that was my review of Despelote. Again, I think if you want a short game to play and it's on sale, then check it out, because it is kind of short and nice to play and very one and done. You can play it in an afternoon. But I think, yeah, if you are, I don't know, if you see the high Metacritic scores and you think, oh, this game is maybe like revolutionary, a bit like Blue Prince was earlier this year, or Claire Observe Expedition 33. It's not that. It's definitely not that. It's as I'm trying to push at in my summary there. It's a game that artsy critics like, but probably normal video game players feel like it's just a little bit undercooked and underwhelming, because, yeah, like I said, it progresses the medium of video games in the sense of, like, this is an interesting story that could really only be told in video games, but actually as a game, as something that you want to play, it's not really there. It's just too passive. The mechanics aren't fleshed out, and I think that's okay. You know, it's made by a very small team. I think the scope of the game from the developer is very much he wanted to tell this story, and that's exactly what he did. I think the art is fantastic. I think that makes the game stand out, again, like against any other indie game that was released on Steam this year. And again, the sound is great, but I don't think it's a must play. So yeah, I would wait to play it if I was you. But yeah, guys, thanks for listening to episode 68. I hope you enjoyed. Have you played Despelote, or is it still on your backlog to beat? Did you play the demo during the Steam Next Fest, and have you decided to go on and play it, or has this podcast possibly paused that for you? Do let me know. And also let me know if you do know any other good footballing games that I should play that aren't, FIFA, Pro Evolution Soccer, Mario Strikers, or Football Manager. Any other games other than those, let me know, because I would love to play them and try them out for myself. If you're a Spotify listener, you can, of course, let me know by commenting on the episode. The comments are below, and also on YouTube too, so you can obviously comment there too. But if you're listening elsewhere, let me know on social media by @me on Blue Sky, or you can come and join our Discord. The link is in the description. Do come and join. Like I said, I'm recording middle of June right now, so it's very much all about Switch Switch 2, a lot of Mario Kart, a lot of Wind Waker discussions, a lot of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom discussions. So if you're also just got your Switch 2, want to talk to some people about it, come and join the Discord. That would be great. Also, as I mentioned before, if you're interested, check out my full written review of the game over on Patreon. The link will be in the description of this podcast. And speaking of Patreon, if you have enjoyed this episode and would like to show your support, consider joining my Patreon at the $2 or $5 tier. If you do, you will get access to all of my content 24 hours before everyone else and get access to my Patreon exclusive podcast, Beat Your Bonus. And like I said, this month's episode will be my thoughts, my early impressions on the Switch 2, what I like, what I don't like. So if that sounds interesting, do consider subscribing on Patreon to get those exclusive episodes. If you're in the mood to listen to more content about quirky indie games, check out episode 65 of the podcast about Spilled, and also check out episode 62 about the amazing Slay the Princess. And finally, as always, Beat Your Backlog needs your support. So if you've enjoyed the episode, please do leave a 5-star review on whatever streaming service or audio service, podcast service, whatever you're listening on. Please do leave us a 5-star review because that helps people find the podcast. So thanks so much for listening. I hope you have a great day. Bye bye.